We know that the Zoom works on a Saturday morning if things aren't frozen. Are you going with coffee or water?
Oh, I've already had a bunch of water, but this is coffee. Shameless
Um,
driveline plug.
yeah, nice little driveline plug, which is up in Washington. Beautiful place. I've driven past it.
Shameless, shameless Slovenia plug too on there.
Just a
Like,
nice little drop in. When you've been to Slovenia, so what are all the other places in the world that Rachel Belkovic has been to? Before we take this in, and I'll segue this into a sweet conversation, but ride me through
you want me
the
to list them? Are you serious?
go to the top experiences, places in the world, top experiences, and America can be included.
Top experiences?
Yeah, top memories. Like when I say, what are the
All right.
best
Okay.
titles in your book that involve the world?
Oh God. I would say like New Zealand and Slovenia, and probably I would even go with Malibu. And you want me to do this right now? Okay,
That's
Slovenia
three.
is okay. The coolest, probably one of the most impactful, coolest experiences I've had is this last summer. So this is about 6 months ago. Drove I moved to Europe. Little backstory: moved to Europe for second master's degree in biomechanics and statistics. I was there for a year in Amsterdam. At the end of my program in Amsterdam, my sisters met me, and we drove from Amsterdam to Slovenia, or to Croatia, really, but to Slovenia. That's about, I don't know, it's like 1,200 miles. But we drove through Europe, and we did the Swiss Alps, and we did all of this, and in Slovenia, we actually met my family, like our family. So my last name is Balkovits.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really unique name, obviously. But
Mm-hmm.
we went to Slovenia and we met like our basically third cousins,
Wow.
and heard the story of my grandfather leaving the home, which the home that my great grandfather grew up in is still standing, which was really cool. And we heard the story of how basically he like got kicked out of the house, and he literally like up and left with his girlfriend, which is my great grandmother, to the United States, and didn't tell anyone. So didn't know where he went, and he moved to the United States from Slovenia and just started a new life. And here I am talking to you on Zoom about that. Isn't that crazy?
That is
So
crazy.
that was like, yeah, that was one of the most impactful things, just because it caused a lot of reflection on like
Yeah.
where I came from, and when we think we have it hard, and just thinking about my great grandfather and my great grandmother, like coming over on a boat, not telling their family. They're like, hey, let's go to this new country. And they just left, and like never to see their family again. And my even my grandfather, so his son and my grandmother, just what they went through, and my grandfather was in the war. And it just caused a lot of reflection. And I probably think about that experience like literally every single day. I would say every single day.
Do you think that, so I've been to Slovenia too, which is a wild place. I can't remember the place I hiked. It was one of the most beautiful spots I ever hiked in. And it was wild driving through the villages because there was no electricity, right? And so they were all, centralized wood burning heat. Now, it's cool because I can kind of remember that. Now it's not as deep as your roots to it, but do you think that your feeling that changed you, do you think that that's because you can feel like your family heritage? Like, do you feel like you can feel the like soul of that?
Yes, like 100%. I mean, it was the family over there, thankfully, they just like showed us around their land, and they had created a headstone for my great grandfather
Yeah.
way long ago, because they didn't know when he died. So they just, in our like family cemetery. And it was also really amazing to, like, the town that they live in is Zilj, but there's a town called Balkovets in Slovenia. And so to be such a rare, like in the United States, like no one can pronounce it. It's a weird last name. And there it's like home. Like
Yeah.
that is our home. Also, I'm kind of the oddball. Like I have two sisters that we all look alike, but they look like twins. And I'm like a little taller. I have kind of darker skin, lighter hair. And we walked up, and I'll never forget, we like kind of walked up, and I just like saw my cousins, and I was like, that's where I came from. Like, okay, I
Yeah.
look like them. And there's this really strange sense of belonging that I hadn't felt before. that was totally unexpected. Like we kind of went and we were like, okay, in the car, we're like, okay guys, this is gonna be kind of weird. We'll be there for 30 minutes. We'll get the heck out of here because we don't know these people. They're strangers. And we stayed for hours and we're able to go around their property, and they showed us like the house again where my great grandfather grew up, you know, and where he ultimately left to go to the United States. So it was like extremely powerful. Like I said, I saw people that like looked like me, you know, strangely like me. I mean, they looked exactly like my dad, like my grandfather. So it was pretty, yeah, just like I said, a sense of belonging that it was totally unexpected and sounds kind of cheesy, but it definitely hit me hard. So pretty interesting.
That is so interesting. And I believe in what you're saying too, in terms of like the feeling of it. Obviously I believe the story of it, but I'm looking at it as, do you think that like the concept of that, like do you think that everyone should sort of peel into their history? Because I would have to imagine like when you get into that depths and you know what your family did to get to America, even if you weren't a part of that, but then you can like feel it. Do you feel like that is what gives you fuel to make change or impact as an individual?
Oh, I wouldn't have said that before, but now that I've had the experience, I'm like, okay, it's the coolest thing that I'm almost glad that I'm not married and I haven't changed my name because like
Sure.
there's some cool things happening lately, like with the Yankees and being hired, and the Balkovec name is out there. And so, you know, I'm like, oh, I'm doing right by my like if my great grandfather was alive, my great grandmother, especially because as a woman, you know, they would just lose their mind. They'd be like, wait, what? Like,
Yeah.
how is it possible that a woman is working in men's professional sports and doing these things? And it's like, okay, I'm like doing the Balkovec name proud. So I don't know. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something that I don't know if I recommend it to everyone, but we knew that we had family over there. And I just think if you do know, I think it's worth the trip.
Sure.
And like, also, I mean, I'm a strong woman and I have strong features.
Yeah.
And we were in Slovenia walking around and my sisters and I were just like, they look like us. Like I'm like, okay, there's this strange sense of belonging where before I definitely am a unique person. I have a unique look. My bone structure is unique. And I'm like, okay, now I know where I get it. Like it was just a kind of a clarity moment. I don't know if I would recommend it to everyone because I don't know that everyone would have that same experience, but we definitely had a very like powerful, unique experience there.
That is fascinating to me. Are the people, I guess I didn't pay attention to Slovenia. Are the people like, what is the build of the people there? You know how you hear Russians are big lifters, you know, or like Samoans are huge, like, you know, football players, whatever, or wrestlers and those sort of things. Like, what is the Slovenia like view? What is the
like
body, I guess?
I mean, right, you wouldn't have noticed it unless because we were like, oh my God, these people look like our dad and our grandfather, just like the strong. So I have like a very like strong nose, strong like forehead, just different shape to my face. And it like, we only noticed it because we kept looking at people and going, oh my God, that guy looks like our uncle. Like that guy looks like our dad. That guy, it was just pretty unique for us personally. But what I realized is, I think like we can probably go for a long time on this is we used to be so tribal, and even within our small communities, like there's a town called Balkovec and it's like everyone in the town there is named Balkovec. In fact, when we first were like driving through Slovenia to meet our family, we were driving and there's this, we lost our minds. We drove past, there's a restaurant called Restaurant Balkovec and we were like, like we lost our minds. We pulled up to the side of the road. We were like, what? And we went into the restaurant and we were like, hey, like we're Balkovec, you know? And they're like, okay, like, yeah, we didn't even realize because we had just drove in.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, everyone is Balkovec. Like we're not, you know, they're like,
that is
okay.
wild. That would be trippy.
It was in that little area, it was like Smith, right? So I think again, just realizing we all used to be so tribal and have this like tight knit community. And obviously for many reasons that has changed. And so again, it gave me this really strange sense of belonging that I've never felt before, because I was like, oh, my great grandfather came from here and he was known by everyone in this town, and they have land with like vineyards that they would like share, and they have this
Yeah.
ginormous garden that they live off the land. And
Sure.
I mean, it just reminded me of like how in some ways unnatural our lives are in the United States, because we are this melting pot, which is great in some ways, but also like we've all lost our roots.
Right.
So what are our roots now, and who are we? And it's tough because our country is so huge. That's another thing that you learn when you live in Europe. Like the countries are tiny, so there's a tiny bit more like pride within the country. And I know, okay, I'm a proud American, but like there's a tiny bit more like camaraderie and tribalism within each country because of that, because they're so small.
Yeah.
Whereas the United States is so huge that it's a bit more lost, I think. So there's a lot of lessons out of that, but definitely like the tribalism, like the feeling of community. I was like, wow, okay, this is a very tight community of Bolsheviks that I am not a part of,
That is wild. The community aspect would be, it seems in my mind as if that would be trippy. Like if I were to experience that, it would be rather trippy. You said something in there that I absolutely loved about roots. And obviously you and I aligned with the tribal part of just like training, simplifying, thinking, being communal with your people and having a good tribe, social connection, those sort of things. But the thing that I really like about you and what I love about conversations with you is that typically we'll either call each other to talk for some sort of topic, and then 3 hours later there's like a dinner missed and we have to realize we have to go, wow, that was deep, which is awesome, right? Because then we start thinking. But something that I always think about, and you're one of the people that I communicate a lot with this, is if everybody is like seeking change or improvement and all these sort of things, because I would say everyone wants that, would you argue, and I think we would both agree, that roots to yourself as a singular being is like the foundation of trust that you have to take that on, And I mean, it doesn't have to be that you have to travel back into your heritage. You've already alluded towards that. But what is it that you have found that you can have and make it like tangible for people you're in front of, where they can kind of uncover their roots? Because everybody already has roots. Like they already have purpose and passion and all these things that they need to peel out and get. But what would you say if you could take that, bundle that up into some shareable goods and then hand that to the world? What is it that gets you to your roots, or at least to understand your roots?
Ooh. I mean, I think so. As right now, I am in St. George, Utah, and I'm a habitual nomad. And I think that the number one thing for me personally of like how you would find out who you are, what your roots are, what your values are, just what you like to do in general, is just to be alone. And that could be literally or figuratively speaking. But I think just for any like young person out there, I like, do not like get out of relationships that aren't serving you, and just be okay with being alone and not having a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever. And like, so that's one part, but also like very literally being alone. Like don't have roommates whenever you can, or travel alone. You don't need to travel with somebody. Oh my God. Some of the most amazing trips that I've taken were alone, because you wake up in the morning and you don't turn to your friend and go, what do you want to do today? You have to make the decision for yourself. And so that can be taken, that's like, okay, you go on a trip by yourself, but also in your career, if you have to turn to a boyfriend or a girlfriend and go at the age of, by the way, 22 or 23 and go, what do you want? Then you never know what you actually want. You never know what you actually value. Yeah. And so like when I'm by myself, I'm eating a certain way. I'm listening to certain audiobooks. I'm not watching TV. I'm actually the best version of myself when I'm by myself. It's only when I get around other people and I have to go, what do you want to do? Now, hopefully I find someone someday that I'm the best version of myself also with them, but like typically, this is going to sound, I don't care how it sounds. Typically when I'm around other people, I'm not eating as healthy. I'm somehow watching television that I don't want to be watching. I'm somehow just consuming conversation that I don't want to be having. And so like, I guess either you're completely by yourself so that you can understand what your value system is apart from anything else, like without anyone else, interrupting your streams of thought. So I think like alone time in the literal sense, if you can, where you're like out in the wilderness by yourself and alone. You're not alone if you have internet. You're not alone if you have phone service. So shutting off the, like putting your phone on airplane mode, because you're not alone if you can open up your social media and see what other people are doing and other people are giving you feedback on your photo that you posted. You're not alone. That's not what I mean by alone. I mean like no noise. Your thoughts are all you have. That's, I think, how you develop an understanding of your own personal value system. But that is, as you know, so rare for people to actually do.
Yeah, it is very rare. Before we kind of got on this and we were just kind of communicating with each other, something that we both kind of talked about was the piece of the COVID-19. If we get away from the economical, the health stuff, and then you go to, because you're still human, right? Like life didn't end for who's ever living right now. So it's like you're still in space, thinking, doing things, like you're creating. We didn't lose time. There's still a 24-hour day. And if you're afraid to be alone, that could be very strenuous, very difficult, right? And now if we
Yes.
talk about this as like individuality and enhancement as your own person and the world, which we'll do, and we'll figure out, we're in the midst of that right now. I think the thing that you just said that has really aligned with me, that I've gotten to see for myself in the last month, is how important it is to be alone or have that connection with people who are like yourself, or in the position of, I want to have that conversation. Because what I've noticed as an individual is, now that I'm not around people that often, and this isn't just friends, right? Because as an entrepreneur or as a coach, you're around hundreds of people. Whether you like or don't like, it's irrelevant. You're just in front of people. And what I've realized is that the input has become less. And I didn't really pick up on that until the last week or so. So, I mean, the first couple of weeks I didn't notice, but I just started noticing that the input and feedback from other people's emotions or experiences has become incredibly less. And that space has opened up, and you said it early, creation, right? And that space has opened up, like, okay, well, if this were back to overall life, or back to that moment, or when I go back into these positions of chaos, like there's so much importance to have design time and structured time to do what you just said.
Yeah. So if you can't, I mean, for me, I've had opportunities based on my career and experiences where, I mean, I can be alone, really alone, in the middle of the woods. What am I talking about? Laos was one of my most impactful and important experiences. And I've had an opportunity to do those things. If you have kids, a wife, a husband, a job, and you can't ever really be alone, you need to build in those times. And that could be 10 minutes a day, or that could be like, I envision whenever I have a partner to go, hey, I'm leaving for the day, bye. And that should be okay. Like, I need a day of like space from you, space from this, space from that, to like let my own thoughts start to flow, and let the space, like you said, like I forget, and I'm going to butcher this, but basically I've heard someone say, your brain is like real estate, and there's only so much space. So if I'm talking to you, Harvey, and I'm really engaged in this conversation, I'm not having creative flow going through my brain. I'm not thinking about my own business. I'm not thinking about my job with the Yankees. I'm talking to Harvey, and there's no space for other thoughts to flow.
Right.
So to create mental space is something that people I don't think really pick up on. And some people like literally never get it. Like if you've got kids and a partner and a job, you might never get an opportunity to just take a day for yourself. And I don't mean a spa day. I mean, take a day for the mental space to clear. But what's really scary is, even for a person like you, who I consider to be pretty thoughtful, it took you a few weeks to go, whoa, here's this space. It took me 2 days after we were no offense. That
Okay.
was a humble brag. Like it only took me 2 days, Harv.
I didn't even look at it. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
But like literally 2 days after we were sent home from like MLB was like, okay, everything shut down. 2 days. I just got this wave of like creative flow and just like space. And I was like, like I'm by myself again and I can let the Rachel thoughts flow clearly without anyone else. And we don't even do it on purpose. But if somebody is sitting next to me and I have a thought, I'll go, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And why do I have to ask them what they think about it? Why do I have to bring them into it? So there's huge benefits to being alone. And like for me personally, I'm single. And so like I'm alone in like many ways. And also I'm alone, like kind of figuratively speaking in my career. I don't really have a lot of people to go, what do you think about this? How did you do this? I don't have a lot of people to like just bounce ideas off of, period. And so I have to ask myself, which is one of the most healthy things. And going back to the first question that tipped us over the edge of this rabbit hole, like how do you create your own roots and value system? I really think being alone is one of the best ways to do that. And there's many different ways you can accomplish that, but obviously I'm biased to some of those ways.
Well, I think it's just finding your own way, for everyone who's going to listen to this. It's more of I love the thing that, because I'm like that too. And by trait, if you don't spend time alone, then you don't know like your good and bads, right? Like by trait, I'm a shy person. I'm dependent on a lot of things. Like by trait, I grew up not wanting to do things unless you did it with me, or I didn't want to go out and I liked being alone because I was shy, but I didn't like being out in the world unless I had like someone with me, And so the problem with that is I'm also a creator. Like I would look at myself as a creator. Like that's my art of expression, right? I like thinking through things specifically in the field of human performance and then just like questioning it and just posing questions, not that you're right or wrong. I'm just a curious person. That's sort of how I've tried to design my days to be like that. And then I want to experiment on my own. Now to full circle that to what you said that made me think about that was now a person who thinks of ideas, like I try to align myself with idea creation. Like I actually see myself as a person who gets value monetarily off of my ideas. So my ideas have to be solidified, believable, articulated, and then I have to be able to take that out in the world to speak to somebody where they think they can take that and become better, right? Which is a completely very subjective space to be in. Now, what you said of if I have a thought, I say it to this person. What I've been working on for the last couple of weeks in this time is recognizing that your thinking, if you're not alone or if you're not spending time articulating your thoughts, if you take that and you just spit that out into the world, there's no way that the person next to you, it doesn't even matter if it's a family member, they don't see it how you see it. So their feedback of it could immediately eliminate the idea. It could disgruntle the thinking. So if you didn't articulate it well enough, then the humiliation of that feedback will stop you from acting, or at least moving on further in curiosity. So that's where I find a lot of success. And that's where I'm saying to you of the part of where I've noticed that is, as an entrepreneur, my livelihood works on being in meetings and networking and in keeping moving and all these things. So it's like the lack of that has made my well-being, my like enjoyableness, my piece of day skyrocket because I'm now only talking to either my clients or an organization that I work with or people like yourself. So, or my family, my closest family and friends, So
you're choosing. You get to choose.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, but I love how you talk about the idea because so this is something I know you and I have talked about this a lot, I'm sure, but directly as I'm thinking about this conversation specifically, now what is fascinating is that I've seen you, I haven't seen or known you your whole life, right? But I've talked to you for the last year or so, And I've watched you kind of go, boom, like very quickly. Although I know that that was also happening before I talked to you. And then it just seems like you just keep accelerating and things are starting to speed up. Now, the back end of that is I've talked you through all that and you've been amazing. You know, you've been fun to talk with. You've been the same person that I met day one. And now my thought is, with success or taking your thoughts or individuality out into the world and tackling things and being in those environments, how have you managed to stay rooted? How have you managed to continue to be who you personally want to be?
Okay. Well, okay. All right. Back up. Don't let me forget that question. But
Okay.
like sometimes just what you were saying is, and I said it, you said it, you echoed it. Like sometimes I just wonder how I even got here, because I'll never forget when I was very first getting into professional baseball and I would tell people I want to get it. The response was always negative, always, from my boyfriend, my parents.
Yeah.
I think my sister may have been the only person to go, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But like no one said it was a good idea. I don't even remember a single person being like, yeah, great, do that. That's great. Like no one. So the only person I could listen to was myself,
Mm.
was myself at the time, the only person. And I'm just so glad that somehow my inner voice was louder than every other person. Like I think about, and I don't know if you had the same experience with Mindstrong, but I think about people like Brian. I imagine when he was going through Brian. So and if anyone doesn't listening, Brian Peters, phenomenal story of just like grinding through it, like going through all of these leagues. And I'm sure at some point, whether they said it to his face or not, people were like, so you gotta like get a real
Yeah.
job soon, or
Right.
like what, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
so for me, it's like the only person I could listen to was myself. Now it's almost easier because of what I've like done in my career. When I tell someone, for example, I want to be a general manager, they're like, oh, great. Like, yeah, that makes sense. But
Yeah.
like, that's more crazy than me saying I want to be a strength and conditioning coach in professional baseball. But now people know what I've done. So they'd be crazy to tell me that I can't do that. They would be insane. But when I was first getting in, everyone wanted to tell me why it wasn't going to happen and why they weren't going to respect me and why I could never do it. Everyone, my boyfriend and my parents included. My parents more so just because they were worried about me, not because they didn't
Sure.
believe in me.
Trying to
But
protect.
just like a lot of people because they didn't believe that it was possible.
Yeah.
So I think that the potent message is like sometimes, especially when you're wanting to do something that's out of the ordinary or that's going to take a lot of work or whatever that might be, the only person you can listen to is yourself. So if you don't have those roots, if you haven't spent the time to do the work to know what your value system is and how strongly attached that value system that you really are, then you're screwed, because you're going to eventually listen to somebody who doesn't believe in the same thing that you believe in. So
The
I mean,
the not understanding the attachment to the value system was huge there. And that's kind of, now I'd reframe my question to catch you to that first part of it. But you know, with that stuff, and as you, because I know exactly what you're saying, and I've felt that too. I've felt, I mean, it's the same concept. I was told ice and being in ice and breathing was just stupid, you know, and these sort of things. And I could go into that, but I'm not going to just feed into that same conversation. It's the exact same thing. Brian, I know him very well. I watched that happen, you know, and he just kept moving along, yourself included. That's kind of how our company was built off of those roots, is that'll never make it, all those sort of things. And it's just, if you believe what you're doing, it's just, you just won't stop. And it's like, if you don't stop, it will work. It's wild. Like, as simple as that is, it will work if you do not stop. And you're right, because the first time I talked to you, you said you wanted to be a GM in the big leagues. And that's probably a very well-equipped conversation now. Like, well, yeah, you know, you probably, you know, you have this and this, like, yeah, you could do it, you know. And but you as the human did not forget the original conversations. Like, I have not forgotten what people originally said to me. You know, like, I know the conversations are different now, but I have not forgotten, right? And so it's the same thing in your shoes, and it's also well, same question, because now you're almost agreed with, and you don't want to lose that edge. Sometimes I feel like I don't want to lose that edge, right? And I want to be able to still be a nomad, still sleep on the couch if need be, and you want to just appreciate these things internally, right? You want to appreciate these things internally that you personally uncovered them, but the external world sees you differently now, and that's all good. And that's why I said, like, since I've talked to you, you've been a rock the whole way through. But flip that over and go, now you're in this new space and the conversation is a little bit different. How do you still attach to very valuable values?
So now I intentionally, like, I think at the beginning of my career, or just when I was a young person, I always had like a bug of just curiosity and exploration. So when I first left home, so I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, small town mindset. Omaha's not tiny, but when I first left home, New Mexico recruited me, and I'll like never forget that. I didn't even go on a visit. I looked up the weather, the ethnicity of the school to like understand the diversity of the school and how far away it was from Omaha. And it was 1,000 miles away from Omaha. And so I was like, I don't need to come on a visit. I'll be fine. So I always definitely intentionally kind of sought out being curious and getting out of my environment. But after a few times doing that, and like not having a lot of possessions and move, because when you move, you just get rid of stuff. Right. And now like everything fits in my car, and I want to keep that way for as long as possible. But I think now I know what that does for me, like nomading and being alone, being in a different environment. I know what that does for me. So now I intentionally, like, I make sure that I have those experiences periodically where I'm out. And so like every baseball off season for the past, I guess 3 or 4 now, I've like intentionally left. Like I went to Australia and New Zealand for 5 weeks. I went to Laos and Thailand for 5 weeks. I moved to Europe for a year, like really getting out, again, I have that luxury because I don't have children, and I have that time. So I can just actually remove myself from my environment of the circle of people, the environment that I'm comfortable in, whatever that is. I just pluck myself out and go. And so this is another example, like with COVID happening, I was in Tampa and they sent everyone home. Well, I don't really have a home.
Right.
But I knew I was going to leave Tampa. I was like, I'm out, I'm gone. So I'm out west. I'm in a space where I'm literally by myself. I don't have anyone to go to really. I'm just here being able to hike, be in nature, and be able to reflect. And now I choose it because I kind of unintentionally did that when I left home and went to LSU for my master's degree. And after a few experiences, I started to reflect and go, wow, this is really powerful for my own development. I'm having to be alone and meet new people, be in a different environment. Imagine going from Omaha to New Mexico. That's a huge culture shock. Going from New Mexico to Louisiana, huge culture change. Like and so pretty early on in my young, I would say early 20s, I realized the power of being able to be alone and move and change, and how that affects your growth. So now I intentionally seek that out. And for someone at home, if you can't go to Laos and stay in a village for 3 weeks, or if you can't go to Slovenia and do that because you've got whatever going on, well, fine, but you can still do 10 minutes, or you can go on a walk. Think about this. Think about how crazy this is. I'm just going to put this out there. Here's an idea. Leave your phone at home and go for a walk for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Just an idea. Like that's even that within itself is crazy, because people got to have their headphones with their music and their podcasts and there's all this noise coming in and you can't even think. So you might think to yourself, oh, I'm going to listen to this podcast, which sometimes that's great. I listen to a ton of podcasts and books or whatever, but sometimes I listen to nothing and I just leave my phone at home. Or sometimes I'm in the car and last night I was driving late and it was pitch black and I'm in the middle of the desert and I just shut everything off and I just was with myself alone for an hour of my drive instead of listening to that audiobook and consuming information. Like, be alone with your thoughts. If that's 10 minutes a day for morning meditation or if that's a 5-week trip to a foreign country,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Just
Doesn't
like
matter.
intentionally select time to be by yourself with your own thoughts.
Well, you said something to me. I don't quite remember the time of it. It was months ago. It might even been a year ago or so, but it's stuck with me ever since you said it. But because I agree with it, obviously. But you had told me, Harvey, I don't go on vacations to necessarily relax. I go on vacations to grow. And obviously,
Yeah.
I believe in that too tremendously. I mean, you make choice, and you said the word just there, choice. You know, you make choices to go and grow. Like, because when you come back from that trip, you're going to be better at what you're doing. And what I articulate or comprehend of the alone time is that we can consume information all day, every day, and that's beautiful. But the probability of the information you're consuming that you've already consumed it's not new. You know, you're not consuming necessarily new information all the time. Like what you're reading about something you've probably seen before. It's about basically getting a better understanding of that, right? And to better understand that would be better understanding how you heard it in the past and how you understand it better in the present. And that's like a huge part about reflecting. Meditation doesn't have to be the concept of just sitting there breathing. It can be the 10-minute walk. It can be the 3-minute or 3-week trip. It's just you have to give your brain, which is brilliant, everyone's own brain is brilliant, you have to give it time to digest what you've been exposed to throughout all these experiences. Like there's something that you have done in the last 10 years that you still don't comprehend. And it comes to you in these wild moments of stillness, of a lack of stimulation. Yes. And that's when you really see a lot of your brilliancy internally. And I'm not talking about monetary gain here, anything like that. I'm talking about pure human development growth as an individual.
I mean, yes. Yeah. Just giving yourself space to reflect on what's happened. And I mean, just now, like I'm so thankful that, so I'm doing a lot of interviews and podcasts in the past few months with the whole Yankees thing and being hired. And I'm so grateful that I was actually hired first, full-time 6 years ago in baseball, because I've had time to reflect on these experiences. And people are asking me, how are the players responding? And and my answers are so much better than when I first got in. And thankfully social media and podcasts weren't really a thing in 2014, and it just has exploded since then.
Right.
And so if I were to listen to my first ever podcast, which I remember exactly which one it was, I was probably 6 months onto the job as a full-time strength and conditioning coach in professional baseball.
Yeah.
And oh my God, I just know my answers would be horrible because I hadn't had time to reflect on what was going on. And so now I've had some time to look back on my experiences with players and coaches and being discriminated against, and how I want to view that time in my life where it was really difficult. But to be honest with you, it's I'm so glad that that whole thing happened. And so I can reflect back on that now and have way better answers than I ever would have had if I had just been hired by the Yankees full time, and then it just for some reason exploded and I've had 2 months to think about this. And by the way, no alone time, because I've been, with my at spring training or whatever. So I just am so thankful for time to reflect. And now I'll have better answers in 10 years to reflect on this time in my life. But
I love that you
said. I think you can speed up the reflection process if you're intentionally building in moments of space. So again, if that's 10 minutes of meditation or a 10-minute walk, a 10-minute walk with no phone and no distraction can be incredibly powerful, I think, if you're intentionally doing it. So I think you can speed up the process of reflection if you get in the habit of giving yourself space to reflect. And I think what we're seeing when I'm doing great with the COVID downtime, being alone and whatever, I'm doing great, but this is because I've practiced solitude literally, and I've practiced solitude, of the mind for a really long time. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think some people right now are what do I do when I don't have my colleagues and my boyfriend and my my parents and my family. What do I do when I don't have all of these people to bounce ideas off of? And by the way, social media is a person, kind of, right? You
Yeah.
put a photo up and you get all of this feedback. So no one's really alone these days, or I shouldn't say no one, but it is really hard to truly be alone these days because of social media and the internet. And so you're not really alone. You feel this false sense of like someone's there to give me feedback on what I'm doing. And so I think we just have to be, even nowadays, you have to be even more intentional about creating alone time, and understand that if you go on a walk with your podcast on you're not alone, you know, and your thoughts are not, they don't have space. So podcasts and audiobooks are great. And I'm definitely a consumer of those things,
For sure.
but sometimes you have to put it down. If you actually want to let your thoughts flow, you can't have a podcast going.
Unbelievable, Rachel. It was a great conversation. I'm really happy. I'm really happy that we started our Saturday morning having this talk. You could definitely feel I know that we've done these before on each other's platforms, and I've typically done them. We've done them during the week or so. So you have that week buzz in you, you know, that kind of, that movement where like, I just feel super laid back, having a great conversation with you on a Saturday morning. So ironically too, I know we're both headed out to go for our walks and be in nature. So that was a big part of us in the timing of the Saturday conversation. So, but more so
100%.
than anything, it's always fun talking to you, Rach, and that was awesome breakdown. I have nothing to add on top of that. I think that was hammered at home there. So thanks again for jumping on the Meeting of the Minds. That's kind of how we've been dancing with that title. So Meeting of the Minds, Rachel, huge part of everything. And obviously, let's all just keep pushing each other forward.
Thanks, Harv.